Welcome. You're watching the Moody Lawyer. Justice served with experience and integrity.
Hello and welcome to the Moody Lawyer with attorney Josh Moody. With a rich background in law enforcement and a comprehensive legal career spanning criminal justice, personal injury, and civil matters, Josh offers a unique perspective on navigating the complexities of the legal system. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and today we're talking about hit and run accidents in California and what victims can do when the other driver disappears. Welcome, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Josh, when someone has been hit and the other driver takes off, what are the first few moments like for victims, and what should they focus on right away?
Well, hit and runs aren't as scary as they're made out to be for a lot of different reasons. But obviously, the biggest thing is, obviously getting a license plate, getting as much information about the car as you can, the color, who's driving, how many people are in the car, and then obviously calling the police and letting them do an investigation. Uh, but ultimately, if somebody is involved in a hit and run and they injure you, the most important thing is making sure that you're okay and getting checked out and getting um, if you need an ambulance or the medical aid that you need.
You know, from a legal standpoint, what separates a hit and run accident from a regular collision where both drivers stay at the scene?
Well, for one thing, I mean, it's the biggest thing is whether or not the person has insurance or not, and there's a reason why somebody's leaving the scene. A lot of times, people who are involved in hit and runs, they don't have insurance, so then it's an uninsured motorist case. But sometimes people leave because they've been drinking, they don't want to be put at fault, and they don't want to go to jail. But a lot of times, sometimes people are just scared and they leave. Uh, but they're not as scary as you think, because if you are involved in a hit and run, but you have uninsured motorist, your uninsured motorist will cover you for your injuries that you've sustained, uh, even if the other driver is not located. And then the good thing is, if you do end up getting some type of settlement from your uninsured motorist, if they do find the other driver down the line, your insurance company will then go after them, even if they don't have insurance, to try and recover what they paid you. So as long as you cover that's why we've talked about in previous episodes about the importance of having uninsured motorists, is because hit and runs are very common and they're commonplace. And if you don't take care of yourself, um, nobody else is going to take care of you.
And in the heat of the moment, it's hard to think of those things that you need to do. You mentioned get the color, see if how many people are driving, maybe a license plate if you can see that. Um, do we as the public have access to traffic cameras? Because there's video and cameras everywhere in the world nowadays. What other steps can we take to help ourselves gather information and be proactive in the scene of the accident?
Yeah, a lot of times people don't want to get, and businesses don't want to give up their video, even if it's going to help you, because they don't want to get involved and they don't want the liability. That's why it's always important to have the police involved and they can get it. And then on the personal injury side, when you come to us, we have our own investigators, and then we can write subpoenas uh, and send letters and trying to get those cameras that the public generally doesn't get, or that they won't just release to you just because they're afraid of liability from other parties and privacy rights and all these other things, even when privacy rights a lot of times don't apply, especially on public streets. But that's what they like to claim a lot. Um, but it's important to understand that there's going to be two different investigations. One is going to be the criminal, which is what the police are going to investigate, and then the civil, which is what we would investigate. And um, hit and runs, the police will do that. They'll go and try to find the video and other witnesses and try to put their case together. But they're not going to give you information about doctors and your injuries and taking care and documenting those injuries. So it's all ultimately what we're concerned about is who owns the car, who's driving the car, who does the car belong to, whereas they're trying to put together a criminal case for the driver themselves. In California, it's not a crime to actually leave the scene of an accident. It's it's a crime when you leave without leaving information. So if you're involved in an accident, in the vehicle code, it says you have to leave your name, your phone number, some contact information in your car information, and then you're free to leave if they can, if they can get a hold of you. Because a lot of times people don't want to stick around and wait for the police if there's no injuries, um, or because you're stuck in especially traffic. People want to get off the freeway, get off the road, and go down the road, find a safe place. That's always most important too. You don't just want to sit in the you don't want to sit in the freeway or even on a major road waiting for the police, because somebody else is going to come along and cause injuries too. The biggest problem though, if you do leave the scene, even with your information, and the police do contact you, the other person's going to they're going to say all kinds of things that you may not be able to get to rebut until later. So, but the issue is never leaving the scene. The issue is leaving the scene without leaving information. And even more importantly, that you have a duty, even if you are at fault or you're not at fault, to render aid to somebody you may have caused injury to. So that could be calling for police or telling someone to call for help. So it's not just the act of just leaving; it's the act of failing to leave information. So and you've all heard stories. You hit a parked car, you leave a note on the car's windshield, and that's the reason for that. Yeah, you don't have to stick around for the owner of the car to come along. You just have to be able to leave legitimate information so that they can get a hold of you and get a hold of your insurance.
Thank you for that clarification. You have a background in law enforcement. How do police typically investigate hit and run cases? And what should listeners understand about how far those investigations can go? You mentioned civil and criminal, and that might not be clear for our listeners.
Yeah, it's the bigger the injury, the more it's going to be investigated, and the lesser the injury, the less is going to be investigated. If it's just property damage, or you say you're not injured or a non-injury, they'll probably be done with that investigation in a day or two. But if somebody's killed, now you're talking about vehicular manslaughter, or if you're sent to the hospital and you're in the hospital for days. Now you have great bodily injury. They're going to investigate it a lot longer and a lot stronger and a lot harder than so. The amount of injuries is what will cause a deeper investigation versus an investigation that's not going to take that much time. And I mean, it's kind of the same in the civil case. Your case is worth more. The more pain and suffering, the more injuries. Your case is worth more than when there are no injuries or very little injuries. So they kind of balance out and track that way. But that's why it's important to stick around and document your injuries and say you are, talk about your injuries, tell the police officer you are injured. Because if you leave, and even if they contact you later, how much pain are you in if unless of course you go straight to the hospital. But those are things that they can use against you, and can be good for you if you document it correctly.
So, Josh, if there aren't any witnesses or camera footage, what other sources of information can sometimes help piece together what happened?
Oh, the biggest, I mean, a lot of times people overlook is just the damage on the cars. You can look at I can look at a car and tell you pretty much. I can look at two different cars, or even just one car because the other car is gone, and tell you within a certain degree of accuracy of what happened, and the impact, where one car was, where they hit you at, were you standing still. That you can just tell by the damage to your own vehicle and show that somebody else um, caused the damage, whether it be a rear end or whether it be a side swipe or a T-bone. Um, but one big one a lot of times is red lights, cameras, and somebody will get T-boned and then they leave. Well, that works well for us because you stuck around. You had a green light. I believe you had a green light. Why would you not leave? The other person took off. We can use that as evidence against them that they didn't stick around. The fact that they left and didn't stick around is evidence that they did something wrong, which means they probably, more likely than not, again, preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, they left because they had the red light. So if they are found a couple days later, a few weeks later, or months later, and they'll inevitably say, well, I had the green light. Well, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. You still left. So sometimes, those kind of things, we can use those type of actions after a fact as evidence against the party who caused the injuries. So people get caught up and they forget, and they're worried that, well, I don't have witnesses about the red light or the green light. Well, they left. You don't have a witness because the other party left. So uh, we do a good job in making sure that uh, that actions after an act can be, how it human behavior can affect showing that the other party did do something wrong just based on their acts, because people who drive through green lights don't typically take off after an accident. And so
And insurance gets complicated when the other driver is unknown. What should people know about how their own coverage may come into play in a hit and run? You mentioned uninsured motorist
it
earlier.
is it is your uninsured motorist that will cover you in a hit and run. And if you have a minimum uninsured motorist policy, you're going to get minimum recovery. So you always have to cover yourself. And I tell people when they buy uninsured motorist, make sure you have enough to cover yourself and pretend that the other person doesn't have insurance, or pretend that the other person is going to leave the scene, and you have to have enough money to cover yourself. And that is a big and two, a big, like we talked about earlier, a big reason why people leave is because they don't have insurance and they're afraid of getting in trouble or going to jail. There are still people out there who think that if you don't have insurance, the police will take you to jail, and that's not true, but that's what they think. Um, Uninsured motorist is the best way to protect yourself and cover your injuries and cover your bills from somebody who leaves the scene of an accident.
And based on the cases that you've handled, what kinds of challenges tend to come up in hit and run claims, and what patterns usually make the process easier or harder?
Nothing. I mean, as the biggest issue is just lack of coverage, because people don't carry enough uninsured motorists. That's probably the biggest issue. You get $100,000 worth of injuries, and you have a $15,000 policy. That's a huge. That's probably the biggest issue. I'm telling you right now that the person who is involved in a hit and run probably didn't have $100,000 worth of insurance either. So that's usually the biggest issue. We and again, we get we get, if you do get a payout from your uninsured motorist and they do find the other guy down the road, that you haven't given up your rights if he did have a bigger insurance to go after him, and you didn't, and your insurance didn't give up the right to go recover money from him as well. So there's a it doesn't there's no harm to you if the person is found later and your insurance pays you out. In fact, sometimes it moves the process a lot quicker.
And for someone dealing with injuries, property damage, or both, what are the common mistakes that can unintentionally weaken a hit and run claim later on?
I haven't really seen too many where people unintentionally make your it's hard to make your hit and run case worse, because they only have I mean, other than there might be witnesses, but you don't have the other person's statement. So that makes your statement the only one to go with for the most part. Now, if there are witnesses or something that maybe, speak against you, well, you still have the person who left the scene. So, um, that's always, like I said, that's a consideration, and they're not getting the other person's side; they're only getting your side. Uh, it, it's really hard to, if the other person leaves, it's hard to screw up your own case. Uh, Other than not getting treatment or not taking care of yourself, or um, you know saying you're not injured. Those are, other than that, but I haven't seen too many cases where somebody has hurt their own case on a hit and run. I have seen people, though, that when they do find the other person, then they make things worse for themselves because they leave the scene, but they also admitted things that they shouldn't admit to. But as far as our clients who are wrongfully hurt, um, hit and runs are probably should be the least stressful, because you can't make things worse uh, for yourself. Yeah, it's your statements are the ones that are going to be heard, and not the other person's.
And then, Josh, if you have insurance Your insurance company has a lawyer that would be representing you. Do you also need to get your own lawyer?
Your insurance, if you go after your uninsured motorist insurance, they won't typically assign an attorney at the beginning part of the case. So, but your insurance company is under no obligation to direct your treatment or give you advice or especially give you legal advice on how to um, document your injuries, document your pain. And I hear this a lot too. A lot of times people say, when they call after weeks or months after an accident, and they'll say, well, they never got me a doctor. They never sent me to a doctor. They're under no requirement to do that. So that still applies. You're just paying for the reimbursement of your injuries and your pain and suffering and your property damage. Um, so the same rules apply. You just have nobody looking out for you. So if you think that just because they're your insurance company, they're going to look out for you, they're under no obligation to do so, and they won't do that. So that's an important thing to remember.
It is, and sometimes it gets overwhelming for us. What's a realistic way for folks who might be feeling overwhelmed to get clarity and figure out their next steps? We'll wrap it up right there on that one.
Well, I mean, the easiest way is to let somebody else worry about all of those procedural issues and those investigative issues, and you just worry on getting yourself better. And that's the only way is to get an attorney and have somebody worry about those things for you and handle those things for you, as opposed to trying to take on everything all yourself. And it is very difficult. It is overwhelming, and most people. That's why we're doing an episode on this, is because a lot of people think a hit and run accident is very complicated and can make things worse. And a lot of times it's as long as you have the insurance coverage, it can make things better. It can make things easier, and it can make things faster sometimes. Um, but again, without people who know, without navigating through the system and navigating through the procedures and protecting your case and doing the investigation for your case, it's a lot for one person to handle. Especially most people are not never involved in a hit and run accident, so it's not something that comes up every day for the average person.
Great. Thank you. And we'll leave it there.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to today's episode of The Moody Lawyer. If you've been involved in a hit and run accident and aren't sure what to do next, Josh and his team can help you understand your options and protect your claim from the start. Visit moodylawyer.com to schedule a free case evaluation. And don't forget to like, subscribe to the show, and share the episode if you know of someone who might need it. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.